My name is Jimmy Lewis.
And I'm Ryan Hanna.
And this is the Better Rider Podcast. This is where all of us at Jimmy Lewis Off-Road Training try to give you some advice on motorcycle riding to make you, of course, the name of the podcast, a better rider. And, of course, we couldn't do it without help from some of our sponsors, Climb Gear, which is excellent off-road motorcycle riding gear, and Kenda Tires are both big supporters of this class in general and myself personally. So we'd like to give a little thanks to them for helping us out and bringing this little bit of message to you. So we're still kind of introducing a lot of our coaches to you. These are guys that either are currently coaching with us or in Ryan Hanna's case have coached with us. In fact, I think you were probably one of our first, like I'll call you a certified coach.
Yeah, like a long-term coach.
And long-term, because you were, how old were you? 15?
I was 16.
I think, yeah, okay. So it was when, you had just got your driver's license.
Yeah, that was the thing. You wouldn't let me come teach your class until I got my driver's license so that you didn't have to pick me up. Okay,
this is right. Yeah, because it was usually... Those days we were driving from Southern California out to Primm, Nevada on the day before the class, and it was a grind just to get everything ready because I was still working full-time job. I don't know where I was at the time, Dirt Rider or Cycle World.
Cycle World.
I was still at Cycle World at the time, so I pretty much had to put my 9 to 5 in, and then battle our way out through traffic to get out to Primm where we used to do our classes. Yeah. So Ryan helped us out for a number of years, and it was kind of on and off. You decided to go be a professional racer at one point.
Yeah, I tried to do that.
What else did you do?
I played around a lot.
Yeah, he would come and go, which is no problem. But the reason I brought him back on is he brought his girlfriend out with him to the class last weekend we just taught, and I'd sort of forgot how many times you've come back in between. I thought it was going to be a much longer run, maybe 3 or 4 years. No. Since you had been to a class, but he reminded me, he's like, yeah, I rode out here on my BMW a couple times. And I'm like, oh yeah. And then I was asking you, did I let you coach at those ones?
Yeah, you did.
I did.
Oh yeah.
But I clipped you this time.
Yeah, you're like, don't talk to anyone. I was like, that's fine. I can roll around in circles all day. That's fine.
Your certification ran out.
Yeah,
what really happened.
Yeah, my certs were expired.
Yeah, he needs to get recertified, and that's how picky we are about our coaches because we know our curriculum is constantly evolving, and sometimes we realize we have a new, better way of teaching like the same thing or a more detailed way of teaching the same thing. And so oftentimes if a coach disappears for a little while and they come back, they're going to go, whoa, that's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's changed a lot over the years.
And a lot if you look back at the 20 some odd years we've been doing this. Yeah. I remember when we used to teach fanning the clutch a little bit. We used to teach reducing the power with the clutch.
You mean we used to teach melting clutches and melting brakes?
We tried to tell people not to do that. We tried to teach them how to do it like the way that we thought was proper, but
it didn't work out long term.
Yeah, no. An advanced rider does this all day long, but we started rethinking what we were actually doing and what worked better. And that's how we've arrived at where we're at.
The class is much better suited, especially for beginning to intermediate riders. I think it's a way better curriculum.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's easier to teach.
Yeah,
and it also has longer legs because what we're teaching now is so very basic and it's so overlooked a lot of times when with the way we used to teach, you would get to a point where all of a sudden what we were teaching you may not have worked because we forgot the basic element, the balance and the traction were left out and they were making up with momentum. And then, what happens then?
Oh, yeah.
So a little bit about yourself. It was interesting. I met your mom through my running club.
Yep.
And
in a bar in San Felipe.
Yeah, well, that's how I met you.
Yeah, that's how. Yeah.
And I knew she had a kid that wanted to ride motorcycles, and she wasn't excited about this. But when we met in San Felipe, I'd ridden my motorcycle there, and then we got to sit down at dinner and talk a lot about how motorcycles kept me out of trouble when I was younger. They were a positive influence, and she was so worried about you getting hurt.
I did a lot.
Yeah, I think that was and good. But I told her, I said, look, it's going to teach him respect for not getting hurt, and it's going to teach him how to manipulate a mechanical object and respect it. And you can use it to help him get his grades back up in school. And I think I sold her.
Yeah, no, it worked. I got my grades back up. Also, the only times I really got hurt was when I was completely ignoring the fundamentals that you had drilled into my head. And I was like, well, I'm going to try this. And then that didn't work. So eventually I just came back full circle, started doing better in my racing career. But until I, mistake in the dust, you always said not to pass in the dust, but when you get a bad start, all that adrenaline goes bad.
And once you enter into the racing realm, you for most people, they kind of anticipate some risks. Like you just kind of have to expect risks in the racing thing. When you're just out riding, you probably shouldn't be taking risks. I don't want to call them unnecessary, but you shouldn't be doing that. You save that. Like when I see people just trail riding like they're racing, it's kind of scary because at least at the races, there's usually some medical
there's an ambulance.
They kind of know people are going to be pushing it, and they're prepared for some accidents. We're just out trail riding, maybe not so much. And we did a whole episode on our Tech Talk podcast about how to be prepared for these kind of things. And the funny thing is you can never be prepared enough. But if you ride safe and smart, in control, understanding your ability level and the capabilities of your machine, then stuff shouldn't go wrong. Racing, you're going to be pushing it.
Yeah.
So, back to the original, the early days, I remember you were definitely, if somebody, probably the worst thing to tell you was you can't do that.
Yeah. That's still to this day the same thing.
Which is the same with me. I recognized a lot of this. And
you weren't very good at reverse psychology.
No, not then. No. I'm just because I knew what I was telling you was correct.
Yeah.
And it was from my own personal experience. I'm like using my experience to try to help guide you. And it was like next thing you know, it's like, didn't I just tell him not to do that?
Yeah. No, I still remember sweeping your class and then bringing your brand new 950 in, and it had octagon wheels. And that was like a deal breaker. You put me on a suspension. You're like, you're out 2 classes, and I needed the money from the classes. I had things I needed to buy, but so I learned not to make Jimmy's wheels square anymore.
Right. Those are that can be expensive. And it's something that, and it's also a perception thing.
Yeah.
We don't want our coaches out doing stuff we're trying to teach, riders not to do. And at the time on the adventure bikes, since they had such big wide rims, guys were just smashing them left and right. And mine were nice and straight on my BMWs and my KTMs.
Yeah.
And it was funny because every once in a while I would get a dinger here or there, and I never did it. And I'm not kidding. I've put a couple dents in those rims, but so few and far between out of all the dents that have happened. And then people go, well, you dented your rim. And I'm like, no, I didn't. And they're like, well, yeah, that's your bike. I'm like, I didn't do that.
Yeah, well, I'm always good for being a scapegoat, so that's fine.
Well, I know you did. I know you did that. I remember the 950. I still have one of those rims in there. I don't think I ever unlaced it. It's still got a good smiley in it. So, as as you kind of progressed, it's funny because you were one of the first, real young coaches. And we started learning that sometimes people don't want to listen to, a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid telling them what to do. So tell me a little bit about those experiences when you're basically saying the exact same thing that I would say.
Yeah, so I would basically reiterate what you had talked about. And then let them, if they had any kind of opposition, which unfortunately the people that take the class, generally speaking, are there for learning. So I didn't get a whole lot of flack, but there were the occasional individuals, and I was like, this is the proper technique. And I was way better at articulating the classes and the drills and all that stuff than I am now after, so many concussions and all. But the only problem I ever had was like very strong-willed individuals that weren't going to listen to you or Heather. They wanted to do it the right way.
They wanted to only listen to me.
Yeah. Wouldn't listen to Heather. Wouldn't listen to the other folks. And then
they needed to be mansplained from me.
Exactly.
Not child-splained, not woman-splained.
Yes.
Yeah. They wanted it to come from me. And the funny thing is, half the time these guys would come over after you told them, it's like, hey, you're not really standing up, or you're gripping too hard, or you're not really using your rear brake, you're not getting the rear wheel to lock up, whatever it was we were teaching. And you had just told them that. And they would come over and I would tell them exactly the same thing. And I could always tell when this was the second time they'd heard something.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then also the good thing about the class is you get to demonstrate it in front of them. So if you're telling them to do something like stand up, we want you to stand up, or really exaggerate your movement because it's trying to build those fundamentals and not so much that you would do that from day to day, but you need to practice getting farther back than you normally would. So I would do it in front of them and then do it at speed in front of them and be like, this is why it's so important. And then show them what they want to do, which is go really fast and then, have this emergency situation go up.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is why we're doing it slow. And this is why we're articulating things, because watch what happens when you go really fast and do it. And I would, struggle and almost crash on my own expense, right? And then they get it. They're like, oh yeah, I don't want to look like that.
and back then you were still getting better at it.
Yeah.
And if anything, and we went riding today, Ryan and I, and if anything, he used to be like all desire and muscles, and that's changed.
Oh yeah, no.
Now it's like he knows his speed. It's like no need to push it, and I think that's age and experience coming into play for sure.
Yeah. Well, I got my 10,000 hours in for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Put your time.
I put my time in. Yeah.
So one of the things we do in the show that we'll get to a little bit later is we always have a little bit of a nugget. So for all of you that are suffering through all this, it's like, well, how is all this going to help me? Well, you're going to get to know Ryan, who potentially could be coming back and coaching with us or doing some of our online coaching when this starts coming up and available. Mm-hmm. So, you get to know these guys, learn a little bit about our history. But at the end of the show, we have a really good nugget that'll help anybody, anytime, any place.
Yeah. It was developed by a beginner over a long conversation on fundamentals. It was great.
All it was a couple words.
Yes, it was my fiance, by the way.
Yeah, that's cool. So, and this kind of goes back to some of my thing that we talk about is that we're really picky about who we have as coaches, who we use when we. It's not just the next guy that comes along and says, "Hey, I want to coach." Yeah. You have to have a certain ability to communicate. You have to have a certain riding ability. You can't be a non-rider and coach, because a lot of times you need to demonstrate it for the person, no matter whether it's in front of the whole class or just individually one-on-one when we're doing the drills. But more often than not, you have to understand why you're telling a client, a student, what that means. So we always say, ask our coaches, like, why. Yeah. And if you're not getting the what you think is the right answer, ask another coach, and it may be explained in slightly different words, but it'll be the same answer.
Absolutely.
And we don't want it to be kind of like going to one coach and kind of getting, you should just go a little bit faster.
No, that's bad. Yeah.
That doesn't work out like that. So how long has it been? So it's been literally 20 years.
18
years since we've known each other and been riding together. Yeah. And so you have had some racing accomplishments.
Yeah. No, I've done I I did 2. I always raced Ironman because I wanted to go to Dakar, and then I realized I didn't have money to do that.
Right.
Which takes an enormous amount. So, but yeah, I raced Ironman for Best in the Desert for 4 years. I did, 5 Vegas Torinos, 2 24 hours by myself on a dirt rider bike both times. Got second the second time to a man child who was way faster than me. But he set me up with the weirdest bike possible for the 24-hour, by the way. That was a Christini 250. I was an open class guy, and he set me up with a 250
Christini. Bike.
Yeah.
The bike's over in the shop.
With a recluse.
Yeah. It still has the recluse.
Which was the weirdest setup. And we went from like 1-wheel drive, 70 horsepower, XR650 to a 2-wheel drive 250F with a recluse.
Yeah.
But somehow made it work. District 37, I was a District 37 president for 4 years with the Jackrabbits Motorcycle Club. Put on 9 races and 7 poker runs for them. And, I've been raced all up and down the West Coast.
Yeah.
A couple times in Mexico.
And you knew that Ricky Brabeck character when he was just a little kid.
Yeah, Ricky Brabeck showed up at, I think he was 13 years old at the Jackrabbits race and blacked out what you would think of a typical Hesperia motorcycle.
Yeah.
Monster stickers everywhere. And he was freakishly fast, but, no fundamentals. So
he's worked hard to get where he's at, and it's kind of a testament to practicing, and that's another thing that we like to kind of bring up on this thing is that we're really big on experiential learning, and you come to the class or you can watch videos that we produce and say, okay, I want to do that, and you can try to put it in your head from watching videos or from just standing there and observing, and it's actually till you go out and ride and feel that whatever it is, practice it a few times to kind of start putting it into the muscle memory that it, before it starts working. And you think about any of like the really basic techniques, it's amazing how many riders have never practiced any of this stuff, especially the balance stuff.
Oh yeah. It was dumbfounding. Just trail riding with all my racing buddies. It was just, they'd fall over all the time. Yeah. And it didn't make any sense. I was like, why are you falling over all the time? I mean, especially the vertically challenged ones wouldn't keep balance. And I was like, it's more important for you to be balanced than anybody else here. Like you gotta keep balance or you're gonna fall down that waterfall right there. And it's gonna be my problem, which I didn't sign up for.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because if you just, anybody can race motorcycles. This is we kind of roll back to racing.
Yeah.
I mean, you can literally you could just go and sign up. A lot of times you don't have to produce any sort of, I've taken these classes or I've done this sort of thing. And it's amazing how bad of riders some, we'll say novices and even intermediates, let alone some experts in general skill set. But it's also amazing in the racing world how good some beginner riders are, the sandbaggers. When it kind of comes down to it. So when somebody says, "Oh yeah, I race,"
it doesn't mean
that doesn't mean much. I ride this class, and it's like okay,
I mean, and good on them. Like if you want to push your abilities and all, but the basis is get the fundamentals down solid, get the balance and figure out what traction is. How many wheel spinners have you brought up to go trail riding before? I
don't like them.
Yeah.
And they're just spinning because they don't know any better. They just think that that's the way to do it. But the thing that's really changed in two directions, if you think about it, is with the internet and YouTubes and Facebooks and the Grams, is that you get to see all these videos and watch all these guys, and you get to see what the top riders post, and you get to see what the ding dongs are doing.
Yeah,
and hopefully you can identify which one of those things is which. Yeah. That's kind of an important thing to be able to do. But if it's a top rider with millions and millions of followers, and he's claiming that it's like, hey, look at me, and he's doing good. That's probably something you could watch.
Yeah, you got to have some video value too.
If it's someplace in between and he's telling you how to do it, or you watch the blooper reels,
yeah,
the fails. which I hate watching, except I watch them because I see the same things over and over again. It's just when you watch the fails, it's no respect for the balance, not understanding or feeling the traction.
Yeah.
And then everything else kind of just compounds from there, whether they lose control of the controls, whether the machine is not designed for what they were trying to do to it. You know, like I always say, motorcycle versus water is always kind of an interesting thing. Motorcycle versus rock walls. Now those ones tend to go south.
Actually, I think the fails are more important because then you can actually see these top level riders like that it's not just a highlight reel every single time. You can see that they have to practice.
When the top riders show.
They have to practice. It's like it's not just all highlights. You can't just show up to a desert race and you're like, I'm going to win this thing because I watched a million YouTube videos on like how to win this thing. It's like, well, you didn't see like all the fails that went into making a good race or all the fails that went into being like the most bitchin' trail ride.
Why can't I go as fast as that guy? I mean, I've got the same bike and the same gear.
You can't buy that stuff.
Yeah. There's some technique in there, really.
Yeah, who knew?
And it's like you know, it's the same thing. You watch, you know, the skateboarders, right? And they do their little banger video part. Yeah. It's the most amazing stuff you've ever seen. And then you get a chance to watch how many times they attempted that trick.
Oh, like 10 times.
Yeah, and skateboarders are a bad example because
they crash all the time.
They always crash.
They crash all the time.
And it's. I don't think that's a good way to operate a motorcycle. In fact, the scariest people I've ever seen on motorcycles are skateboarders because crashing is just their MO. Yeah. And all of a sudden now they've got something that can really crash them. Yeah. It's not just a little board that they kick out from underneath them and they try to get their feet back on the ground. Motorcycle usually gets stuck to you, comes after you, a few things like that. Hence why we really don't like people trying to put their both feet on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Because then
you've lost everything.
You're essentially along for the ride. So what else changed, do you think? What have you seen evolve in our curriculum?
It got a lot safer as far as like the actual drills themselves. We were doing some things to push, but at the time, that's kind of what everybody wanted, like the skidded J turns we used to do, and then you would speed it up if people were doing really well. Uh-huh. I don't know how many people I saw go over the high side doing that.
Right.
And then the wheel lofting, of course, which is, I will still remember,
been reduced.
Yeah. Like it's a very good fundamental to know and practice on very safely. And I think you've articulated it very well to give people the building blocks to produce a wheel loft every time, right? Because it is a life-saving technique.
Right.
It is super important.
But if you and the reason we're so careful about the way we teach it, and it's just so timing intensive. Oh, yeah. Timing and having bike feel. And for sure, I always say it's like we call it wheel lofting. Yeah. And a lot of people,
not a ripping a power wheelie.
It's not a wheelie. And it's like people, I go, if you want a wheelie, it's really simple. Put your bike in first gear, you take your throttle, grab it like this, and then pull on it really hard. If your clutch is out, you're probably going to wheelie. Yeah. And even when we do when we combine some of our drills where we do acceleration, deceleration, do the full turn and come back, we combine all four of our things into a single drill. Yeah. Most of the time when they start getting sporty with and they take off, they start wheel lofting right from the first roll because they I think it's a little bit more by mistake. Yeah. And then they're just getting confident on the bike and they're understanding, hey, I can be aggressive and even on the bikes that you wouldn't think, some of the big adventure bikes are kind of difficult, but even on some of the small, like the 230s and the 250s.
It just depends on them.
Yeah. Guys are taking off and the front wheels coming off the ground.
Well, the smaller bikes actually have harder controls to pull in half the time because they're all cable.
Yep.
Well, the new ones are all hydraulic. So when they let it go, the whole thing goes, and then they're like, "Oh my, what happened here?"
And we don't want wheel off by mistake.
No.
Yeah, we don't want you to practice mistakes.
Yeah.
And then like same thing, we demonstrate on a log, and sometimes I'll get somebody who's really good, and we're asking them to just wheel off, but not approach or hit the log.
Yeah.
It's just wheel off. Show me that you have the control to get the front wheel to come up, and you're not going to go anyplace.
Yeah.
And then they go, like this, and they're up on the log. And we've had it when we were kind of doing it as a demonstration. The whole class starts clapping, and I'm like, no, that was a mistake.
Yeah, that's bad.
That's kind of what he was dreaming of doing, but that wasn't. He hasn't. And they're like, yay! And it's like, no, that was.
Well, something that came with age was, especially logs, right? In general, like I was a desert guy.
Not very many logs out.
Not a lot of logs out in the desert. Yeah. I can explode a greasewood with the best of them, but the logs weren't a thing. But when I got older and I moved to locations that had a lot of logs, I had to really work on that because originally, here's a nugget. Originally, you think that you got to really lift the wheel to get over and then carry that over. Well, that's only if the log's off the ground. If the log's on the ground, you got to make the front end light, slow down the acceleration so the wheel doesn't spin, you don't slip out, right? So you're hitting the log, unweighted with some power, and then just pull over. And it just rolls right over. 99% of the time, rolls right over. It doesn't have to be this big production where you hop off the log. It doesn't have to be an Instagram reel. It doesn't have to be anything like that.
And it's amazing what a wheel will just roll over.
Oh,
I mean, you start saying like, a 21-inch front wheel, how big of a log can it just literally roll over without doing much? And then as it gets a little bit bigger, just a little bit more, technique will help. But what we see is people rolling up to it and they panic, they tighten up, they're out of balance when they first hit it, and then it's game on. Where does it go? And usually the next thing that happens, you see the feet come off.
Oh yeah,
and
always.
Then it's
over.
Ride.
Yeah, it's over.
So we're at that point where we're gonna drop a little bit of a nugget on you. We learned this last night at dinner.
Yeah, last night after dinner.
And so one of the things that people ask me when I'm doing stuff is they say, "Hey, Jimmy, what gear should I do that in?" And my answer is,
the right gear.
The right gear. Yeah, you do it in the right gear for whatever situation, because every bike's different, every situation is a little bit different. But they'll ask me about one specific thing, and they'll go, "What gear are you doing that?" And I go, "The right gear," because I don't know.
Yeah, I'm always surprised with what gear I'm in. I'm like, oh, I was in third. What is that?
And so this is something that can't be taught.
No.
This is experience. But what we found that can be taught, and this is the same kind of answer, is we teach a lot of gripping and regripping of the motorcycle. Constantly regripping and regripping, gripping, regripping. As anything changes, if your body position changes, you're moving around, sitting to standing, standing to sitting, initiating a turn, starting to control a turn, all these different things we teach.
Yep.
We're always saying, well, you got to regrip. And so the question came up, when do you regrip?
All the time.
All the time.
Well, essentially, if you're holding on to the handlebars and you have a certain grip, you're holding on too tight. Yes. Right away. That's the immediate answer.
In the idealized way that we like to teach.
In the idealized way. You're holding
there's
on
sometimes you really need to hold on.
Totally. But if you're just cruising down a dirt road and you had a bump or something like that, and you had to adjust, okay, well, now you got to readjust, and then you're done.
Yeah, grip and regrip all the time. Not just when you're doing something.
Yeah.
It's anytime that you're riding, you should be able to, or to put yourself in a slightly better position. So when do you regrip your motorcycle? All the time. So when you're out riding, think about this.
Yeah.
And if you can't regrip your motorcycle, you're probably doing something wrong, or you're in a panic situation, and that's probably not the best time. You should have regripped earlier, and maybe you wouldn't be in that panic situation to begin with.
So get through the panic situation.
And then regrip.
Yeah.
Exactly. All the time.
All the time.
So thank you for that little nugget of knowledge there that was passed on to us. We, like I said, we're always learning. We're constantly, as coaches, as trainers and teachers, we're getting feedback from our students and
from our coaches, from other coaches.
Yeah, and paying attention to this so that we can, kind of be better at teaching that. So now I can have my one more completely confusing answer, like, when should I regrip? All the time.
All the time.
All the time. So anyways, Ryan, thanks for joining us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Back out here.
Yeah.
Your van life these days.
Oh, yeah. Vagabonds.
Vagabonds and with your dirt bikes.
Oh, yeah. Can't leave without those. So. I actually had to sell my GS, which was heartbreaking.
Painful.
It was super painful. It was the perfect bike. I wanted one since the first class.
Okay.
With your 1150, yellow and black one.
Yeah, the Bumblebee.
Bumblebee. I was hooked. You let me ride that thing and just picture 6 foot 135 pounds soaking wet with 100 horsepower. And I was like, this is what I need.
Right. Well, but at first you just were really attracted to my KTM LC4.
Oh, no. I like the Beamer more than I like that thing. But I couldn't race the Beamer.
Oh yeah. Well, you wanted to race something, and it was like you don't want to buy this as you bought it from me because you wanted I thought you wanted a dual sport bike, but you were going to race this thing.
Hey, it lasted 2.5 days into a 3-day rally.
Yeah, I told you not. I told you. This is where we're at. So, anyways, with that, everybody, we will see you out in the trail.
Yeah.
Cheers.